Strategic Hotbox with Dr. Brandi Stankovic. Discussing leadership, business, and how to take control of your life and achieve greatness. From the streets of Las Vegas, energized, informed, and never diluted. It's time to kick some ass.
Welcome to Strategic Hotbox. It's your girl, Dr. Brandi Stankovic, and I'm here with one of my favorite people on the planet, Miss Stacey Walker. Hi.
Hi.
I'm glad that you're here. And we're talking about a very important topic, diversity. Now, we've addressed this before on the Strategic Hotbox, and we're going to take it to the next level. We're going to talk about how to walk the walk the talk, make things happen when it comes to diversity. So here we go. At the Strategic Hotbox, as you know, we break things into the learn, the love, and the kick ass. So today in the learn section, I'll frame the topic a little bit, talk a little bit about diversity and how I want to dig in a little deeper today. And then in the love section, we'll get to know Stacey and her perspective and what this means to being a leader, what this means to being a volunteer, what this means to organizations. And then we'll give you some tools that you need to start implementing today in our kick ass section. So with diversity, it's time to walk the talk. It's time to make things happen. And as you know, we had a really great conversation with Mr. Ronaldo Hardy. He is an expert in the field of diversity and inclusion. And we talked about cultural competency. We talked about including people. We talked about what diversity is. And we had some great insights. So if you haven't heard that episode, I urge you to do so. And today, I really want to break it down again because the diversity conversation is long from being solved. It's still a topic in the boardroom. It's still a topic in the bar. It's still a topic everywhere. And I think that some of the things that we talked about with Ronaldo have brought to light how intertwined workforce the workforce is, the consumer base is, the future is for organizations, and how essential diversity is going to be for that. And I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again, but really differentiation, value, your value proposition was going to make you different from anybody else is all in execution. We need to take action. And when it comes to diversity, that is exactly the same. It would be great to just sit here and have a beautiful conversation about diversity, inclusion, and the future. But none of that matters if I don't start doing something differently today. We have got to walk the talk. So what does your organization do? How can we do better? How can we create a difference? And I want to be the one also doing that as well. And as you may know, for those listening, that I recently began a new venture, a new position at CU Solutions Group, wonderful organization within the credit industry. And in the process of that, I also work with the World Council of Credit Unions, so kind of a global perspective. And with my work with Global Women's, with my work with young leaders, I took a look at the organization that I work for now and said, where are we statistically? And how many women do we have? And how many young people do we have? And talk to the CEO, talk to my boss about that. And we're in a great place. And I'm very thankful the fact that we are in such a great place from a diversity perspective. And is there room to grow? Yes, there is. And is there opportunity to be even better? Yes, there is. And we'll continue, and I hope to be a big part of that. And somebody recently said to me, well, I'm surprised that you had that conversation. And I said, well, why? Because one, why are you surprised I had the conversation? And two, anybody that was afraid to have that conversation shouldn't talk to me. And I think that that's the power and stance that I want to have, and I want to have people around us that I want a place of love. I believe in love. I mean, love is not just some tagline that we have on this podcast. Love is who I am. And I want that to be where we can be in a place where we aren't seeing the color of each other's skin. We aren't having conversations about that, but really just about human interaction. And I shared in the podcast with Andy Janning about my son wants to be the Star Wars character Mace Windu for his birthday. And for those that don't know Star Wars, that's Samuel Jackson's character. And so Samuel Jackson's African-American and my son isn't. And I love that he never once crossed his mind that would even remotely be a boundary. It just isn't a boundary. And it isn't, but it isn't a boundary to him. And would it be to someone else? Would it be to maybe an adult? Would somebody else try to almost like overdo some sort of like costuming with it? Probably. But my son, it just never even, he was going to be that character, and that's who he was. period. And that's the way I think life should be, that it doesn't matter. None of that matters. It's about the human beings that we are. But there's some statistics that we found that we think are a little ridiculous that I think will set the stage for having a conversation with Stacey. 41% of companies, now this is from Clear Company that created these statistics, 41% of companies say that they are too busy to incorporate diversity. Too busy. Which is clearly not a solution. We, as a group, need to be the catalyst. We need to be the ones taking the action. Another one for you is there are more CEOs named John than there are women CEOs. So there are more CEOs named John than there are women CEOs, which is fun. 5.3% of CEOs have the first name John compared to 4.2% of CEOs that are women. And according to McKinsey & Company, ethnically diverse. I want to make sure I'm saying that appropriately articulately for this. Ethnically diverse companies are 35% more likely to earn above average revenue. So organizations that incorporate diversity and ethnicity are going to earn more, essentially. And diversity isn't philanthropy. Diversity isn't this like thing that, oh, you're a good, what? No, it's just being real. It's good business. So what are we going to do in order to create diversity? I'd like to formally bring on our guest here and introduce you to her. She's an impassioned leader, volunteer. Really, honestly, everything that you touch is energized. And that is Miss Stacey Walker. Hi.
Hi.
You're a board director at XCEL Federal Credit Union, amazing organization on the East Coast. You've won several awards, including the World Credit Union Professional Award in 2007, the scholarship. You have been recognized by America's Credit Union Museum for Women's History Month, amongst others, this year. Yes, 2017 NAFQ Volunteer of the Year, Credit Union Times Volunteer Trailblazer of the Year in 2017, 2012 Credit Union Times Trailblazer being under 40. You're also a DE and an international DE. That's like we're taking over the world as DEs. I love it.
It's great.
And you're a speaker at several conferences and events. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is wonderful. A great opportunity.
And so tell us a little bit about your journey and progression.
Sure. So my journey started in high school. My very first job was working with Smith Barney in Manhattan.
Wow. And
I had an internship through I was part of the Academy of Finance. And I was making money and getting my check, and I was like blown away because before it was like, like a little allowance or something that your parents would give you. And now I'm getting like hundreds of dollars. I remember like cashing my check and traveling by train and being so scared at all this cash on me. And
she's making the hundreds of dollars, y'all.
As a teenager, I was like, what? My parents were like, well, it's time for you to have your own account. And I remember one day, like on a random weekend, my mother and I went to different banks, and they all were saying that I needed to have a parent, co-sign. Even if I wanted like $1 of my own money out of my account, I had to have my mother sign off and say, yes, you can get your money, which I thought was just crazy. So I didn't open an account that summer, and I would just hand over my money to my dad and be like, just hold it. I'm going to decide what I'm going to do, and just give me a minute. And nothing happened that summer. And then my second job was at Social Security Administration, my senior year of high school. And I was in the payroll department. I was working for the federal government. I had to have direct deposit. And someone said, check out the credit union downstairs. And I did. And I opened an account the same day. And there were no restrictions. It was very much so a pleasant experience. And from that day on, I've been a member of XCEL Federal Credit Union.
Really? Honestly, I've been working with you and XCEL for a long time, and I didn't know that was your story. How cool is that?
Yeah, I'm really happy about that. Really excited. And a lot of credit unions do that. They offer accounts for teenagers, kids that are young adults that are under 18, and you can open an account. And of course, you have like free checking and low minimum balance. And
now you serve them as a volunteer.
And now I came back and I said I wanted to volunteer and give back. And when I was looking to give back after like finishing with school, I wanted to join a nonprofit and join a board and really give back from that level down. And I learned about credit unions being nonprofits. And at the same time, they were looking for volunteers. They had put it out there on their website. And I said, let me put my name in the hat. And I did. And I met with someone and interviewed. And they said, we're going to recommend you to be on the ballot. And
how cool. And here we are.
Here we are.
So what does diversity mean to you?
Diversity means like different perspectives, different experiences, engagements that various people can contribute to like an experience. So diversity, of course, varies: gender, age, ethnicity, even just like where you're from. My family's from Jamaica, and there are times where that helps me a lot in terms of experiences my family has had. My grandfather was a farmer, my father and, my parents, they know a lot about farming and agricultural sectors. So diversity is not just about like what you see on the outside, because you don't know what someone's experience is like. You don't know their family history, their background, what they've been exposed to. I love to travel. I mean, so many different elements come forward when you sit down with someone and you talk with them, and they're different from you, and you get to share and exchange that.
I actually love moments of being surprised when you learn and hear and absorb somebody. A really silly example of that is I was watching The Ultimate Fighter last night. Have you ever seen the UFC show? And there was this really awesome killer of Asian descent karate, kind of kickboxing karate person. And then when they popped off and were talking to the camera and telling their story, they were like a Southern belle. They just like had the sweetest. And I just went, whoa. And like you get to know their personality. But I love that they awesome. Seem like so multidimensional. And I know it's a trivial example of that, but you can't judge a book by its cover.
Never.
And
Never.
That's important.
Right.
And so how do we increase momentum for diversity?
Well, momentum really comes down to like, what are your priorities, and what position are you, and how can you affect diversity where you are? And so if you're at a company and, you're engaged in a company, and let's say you're leading the company as a volunteer, as a CEO, or someone like in a prominent position, you really have to like take time and say, well, look around and who's on my team, who do I support, and how do I do that? What actions come forward as a result of that? And if you are not in that position, then look around and also make suggestions. A lot of companies want to hear from their employees as to what's going on. It could be from the customer experience, that if you're forward facing and you engage with your customers and your client base, like let people know, here's what people are telling me and this is important to them.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about tokenism and having the token woman on the board, or the token ethnic group on the board, or something to that effect? It
really doesn't serve anyone any purpose. It doesn't help the organization, because you're really overlooking the benefit of having that person and trying to engage with that person, and what makes that person unique and different, and how can they bring that in terms of like a really positive experience to the group. Because if you're just placing someone in a group just to have them there, you're just really holding a spot open. You're not really engaging with them. You're not understanding them. You're not understanding what they bring to the table as well. And it doesn't serve that person either, because they may feel uncomfortable in that position. They don't know how to contribute. They may have obstacles still in place in the culture in which to contribute. And so them being there doesn't really serve them either. So it really doesn't serve anyone when companies try to engage in tokenism and just, it's really forced interaction and just a forced perspective. And it really doesn't help your bottom line at all.
And the people then almost don't respect the person that's there either, if there's that kind of mentality.
Yes. And it also creates this barrier as if no one else can join this organization if they look like that person or have something similar to that person, because you just want to reserve one position for that person simply by who you are, and it makes other people feel like outcast, and they feel like they can't achieve a certain level either. So it really doesn't help anyone.
Because I think that back in the day, and I wasn't, around 50, 60 years ago, but back in the day, things like affirmative action had a place, because we had to put something in place to force diversity to occur, or it wouldn't have occurred, right? And so I don't want to disrespect any necessity for it in the past, but now that those kinds of systems almost hurt organizations, because then those, if you do have a certain position that must be filled by this particular demographic, then everybody almost looks down to that. Like, it's not necessarily the best person for the job. It becomes the person that fits that particular demographic. And that's hard. Like, it's not the smartest person. It's because it's the young chair, or it's not the smartest person. It's because it's the female, or it's, whatever. And I even see that. Like, I went to a university event recently, and somebody was applying for scholarships and federal dollars and things. And they said, oh, I probably won't get any because I'm of a white middle-class family. And I just went, well, first of all, stop that. And secondly, it's almost like they're looking down on somebody else that could get the scholarship, and forgetting the fact of why they might need it, and completely attributing it to the fact that I'm going to just roll my eyes because I don't fit into that demographic, and so I'm going to look down on something else. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And affirmative action, there's definitely a place for it in terms of, if you have political systems in place against you, if you have social systems in place against you, and against, people just simply based on how you look, then certainly there should be some action taken in terms of like helping people to give more equality in society. But also keep in mind that affirmative action benefits a wide range of people, including, white women, African Americans, Hispanics, Hispanic, Asians, like a wide variety of people. So it's not limited to any one particular group in society. And also, there are also different actions out there. There's legacy actions out there. If you're at a university and your parents went to that university, you have preferential treatment as well and get into the organization. So it's not just looking at like this one group will benefit and I have nothing to benefit from this. No, there are various ways that people benefit from increasing diversity and taking action to increase diversity in society. And
there's a misnomer or misunderstanding of things a lot of times that people will attribute to stuff. Like she thinks that she isn't going to get it because she's of that demographic, and that's what unnerves me, because she's lost sight of the reason that if there was a standard like that in place of why somebody else may. You know what I mean? Because the need was there. Right. And not to like pigeonhole people either, because just because you're Black doesn't mean that you got into organization because you're Black. You could be very smart. You may have the GPA for it. You may have the experience, the background. You may have everything that school is looking for, and you got in because you got in, not because of the color of your skin, period. So it's not to say that because someone's sitting at a table or they're in a room that they're simply there because of the color of their skin. That's not necessarily true. There are very qualified and very smart people in the room, and that is the standard that some organizations have. And sometimes it's hard to get outside of what's really deep inside. So those unconscious bias, right? And we talked a little bit about it with Ronaldo. And I don't know the exact, and I apologize to everybody listening, I don't know the exact organization, that kind of thing. But I saw a speaker last week at a conference talk about an orchestra that had been primarily made of men players for years and years and years. And so they couldn't figure out why it was all men. They thought, well, maybe just men are better players of the particular instruments in this orchestra. And then what they did was a blind audition as the first round of auditions, and so the people that were judging the musicians couldn't see the people, and so because of that they ended up with like a 400% increase of the number of women and diversity that they saw in the orchestra. And they didn't even though consciously they weren't judging, they still were judging. They had like this ideal, what they thought was an ideal look of what a person in an orchestra would be, and when they removed that, there was like this tremendous change in what that diversity looked like. So sometimes even if people don't intend it, it's there. Everyone has it. Yeah. Everyone definitely has it from different perspectives. I mean, there's a lot of discussion within the employment sector as to people's names. Like if you have a name that may ethnically identify you, that some people have felt challenged, that they're not able to succeed because as soon as someone sees their name, they will automatically cast them aside. And there's been like people have done personal experiments where they simply changed their name on their resume and left everything the same. And they started getting more like noticeability in terms of like getting contacted by recruiters and companies and for job placements. And it was very astonishing to hear that. It's hard. It's hard to kind of forge ahead. So what's something that gets under your skin? What gets under my skin is that we talk a lot about diversity and there's very little action, like we're talking now, like what are the action items people can do? And, we definitely talk about diversity a lot. We talk about micro biases. We talk about micro inequities. But in terms of action, what companies are doing, and to the point that when a company does decide to do something, like recently with the major coffee shop that decided to take action and do something, they received a lot of criticism for that unnecessarily, in my opinion. And, but it said a lot about that company deciding, okay, here's the action we're going to take and closing down our shops and actually training people about diversity and about initiatives and about bias and actually speaking to every employee to make sure all their employees are aware of that. And there was a lot of criticism about that. So people do speak out, and it's to be really aware of like, what are your own challenges with that? Why do you feel bothered that a company would do something like that? And perhaps you may want to inquire about doing that with your own organization. Yeah. So what are some steps then? If we could create some steps that, what could people do? Well, reach out to others. Definitely. That's number one, within your own personal sphere of influence. Like, who do you engage with? Do you have your friends like in a certain group? And, when you look around, do you only associate with certain people? Like, what are your personal action items that you may want to, be responsible for and challenge yourself with? And also your sphere of influence within your families, your children, certainly as parents, try to engage your kids in different organizations, different groups, different play groups, have them meet other kids from other cultures, talk to people in your family when you
hear people mention things like you said with that person that mentioned about like, I'm white, I'm not going to get into that school. Challenge someone like that in terms of their thinking. Like, what kind of comments can you make to really help someone to like kind of change their perspective about diversity? So definitely looking within your own personal sphere of influence. And professionally, of course, like look at your employer. Like you said, you joined a new company. Congratulations. And you decided to look around and see who was there and kind of like inquire as to what can be done with diversity. And that was your own personal, initiative. Right. So a lot of people can do a little bit more in terms of diversity and taking action items and holding other people accountable and responsible. But it starts with us first. Like, what are we doing?
Volunteering. I love that idea of volunteering, community organizations, exposure, travel. Right? Any of these things can start broadening the mind, opening, so you can begin to have some of those conversations that we might be fearful of having.
Definitely. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, we have, both of us, we've traveled a lot, different continents. Even I remember we were both in Australia, and I mean, just having a great time. We're in Ireland together, and you really get out there, you really learn about people in different cultures, and engage people from all over the world. People travel for different conferences, and you really have to step out of your zone. When it comes to volunteering as well, like I speak to a lot of people just in general, in the general public, and say, first of all, I'm proud to be a volunteer of my credit union. I love giving back in that way, but also encourage people to join a credit union and to volunteer if they are members of their credit union. And I did that in January. I was at a volunteer service event, completely unrelated to the credit union industry. I was volunteering, helping cutting cloth like for kids to make scarves for vets. And I'm talking to another young lady, and I was telling her about volunteering with the credit union industry. And she was like, really? She's like, I didn't know you could do that. And she's been a member of her credit union for 20 years. And I said, yes, definitely. I said, you would be perfect for, volunteerism within the credit union industry. You have the passion, you have the dedication, you're a member, you're very professional. And I said, go to the branch and inquire. Like, what is it?
So just ask.
Just ask. And she did that. And 4 months later, she was officially a volunteer for her credit union.
Nice.
So I was very happy about that.
So asking the questions, getting out and volunteering, traveling, not being afraid to challenge people when you hear things that are said that you don't agree or believe in, next generation, passing it along to your kids and the people that you're around, and exposing ourselves and the people that are around us. Can you share a funny story in your journey in diversity? And
funny, I was talking to someone earlier this morning about that, and I was trying to think of stories, and not necessarily funny per se, but something that I was like, wow, blown away this morning. There's been a lot of discussion about Windrush in the UK, the Windrush generation, as it were. And this generation was like a group of people, predominantly from the Caribbean, a lot of people from Jamaica, who went to England. They were invited by the government like decades ago after the war to help rebuild because they had a labor shortage. And I was just inquiring because there's a lot of discussion about this. And this morning, I realized, put two and two together, my grandfather was on the Windrush ship. No. And I was like, what? Because I read an article this morning from a UK news outlet that said that there was one potter on the ship, and my grandfather was a potter. And I thought, there are but so many potters in Jamaica. Like, there are but so many potters, period. Especially from Jamaica. And I asked my mom this morning, I said, was your father in the Windrush? And she said, yeah, he went over on the ship. And I looked, he's popular. He was popular. He passed away. And his obituary had mentioned that he was on the original Windrush ship.
So you didn't put your foot in your mouth or say anything about it, that you're just going, oh, never mind.
It was just, I was like, wow. No, I didn't. I was just inquiring, like, wow, what is going on over there? Because again, it touches on elements of diversity. Like, what was the culture about such that people felt that they had to, segue or, divide out persons that are there, and discussions around the Windrush generation came about, and how you had a lot of immigrants, people from other cultures, particularly from, the Caribbean and Jamaica especially, that went to the UK at this particular point in their history. And so a lot of historical context was there, a lot of, cultural differences were there and identified. And it just really touched something within me because, again, like, my family's Jamaican, and I'm just really love to be in touch with, like, what is going on in the world. And this came up, and I was like, wow, this is really incredible. And
that really kind of broadens the mind and changes the perspective. And we've talked a lot about it here on the podcast, but it just really just allows for diversity to be a non-issue, and the more that I learn from my kids too, right? The more I learn to look through their eyes when they don't see any differences, the better It is too, because it shows how much things are ingrained or their experiences in the ways that we've grown up. And the fact that anything that happens like this is something that we're passing along to the next generation too. And so we have got to have the future, the next step to be involved in the process.
Definitely. Parents are hugely influential on their children. And, definitely kids, that's who you learn from first, right? When you come into this world. And so kids do pick up a lot of things, even when you're not aware of it. Kids pick up a lot of things about what their parents do, what they say, little comments in passing, in terms of who they want their friends to be and what about that lady. And so kids pick up a lot. So when you really do identify things within yourself, your own maybe implicit bias that you may have, or, things that were passed down from your parents, in general, to who you are today that create who you are, you really have to say to yourself, what am I passing to my children? And not just your own kids, but your neighbors' kids, your nieces and nephews, kids that really are within your influence. They're under your guidance, and somehow really ask yourself, what am I passing on to them?
Yeah. And you're right. It is a bit of an implicit thing. I mean, they do pick it up. Funny little story to kind of segue our way out, but my son Andrew has long hair, right? And I recently was posting on social media about this, but he is like a little hippie, but we were at a place, and he's young. He's just barely turned 5, so he's a baby. And we were out somewhere, and somebody had really long hair, and he looked over at him and was like, "Look, that dude has hair like a girl," but he said it loud, so the dude heard it, So the guy turned around, he's like, "Nah, man, I'm just a hippie," which was amazing and perfect. And so now Andrew has started to say that. So we will go places, and he identifies himself as the other morning. I think I told you that James, my older son, asked, "When I grow up, will I look like Daddy?" And then Andrew goes, "When I grow up, will I look like Eddie Vedder?" Out of nowhere, just asked if he looked like Eddie Vedder. So now when people ask, people will say, "Oh, is this your little girl?" or say something like that because his hair. He'll go, "No, man, I'm just a hippie." And I love that, because it's good, because they learn, they absorb, they see all that. And that particular individual in that place, the store we were at, made it okay for him to be a little different when he thought he was okay, until people noticed that he wasn't. Does that make sense? It's almost like in ourselves, we think everything's okay until it's not. Until
someone says differently, and then you're like, wait a minute, let me challenge that.
Yeah.
So I love that he's learning that and doing that at age 5. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes. And that the more that I can do, to your point, to empower that into the future, the better. And I hope to continue with that innocence in their eyes, because really it will drive it. But we still have to continue to drive it, to the points that you were making about affirmative action. And there's a place for everything. That sometimes you have to force things to occur in order to really make change. So give us a bold action item or takeaway.
Bold action, even tomorrow, going to work and ask, look around and really put something down on paper. Here's what I noticed about where I am, in my own life or in my own professional environment, and say to yourself, what's one thing I can do differently?
Yeah.
Who do I talk to about this? Let me see what I can do. And then when it happens, be proud of yourself.
Yeah.
You took action to do something when you could have just completely ignored it, like many other people do on a day-to-day basis. And you took action, you did something about it.
Great. I love that. And if people wanted to get a hold of you, how would they do so?
I have a personal page, about.me/Stacey Walker. And you can also email me, stacywalker@outlook.com or stacywalker@xcelfederalcreditunion.org. Quite accessible.
All right. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I enjoyed this.
Thanks for digging into the topics with me. And let's head out to our shout out.
Yo soy Raúl. Estamos en la Ciudad de México y estamos escuchando a Brandi Strategic Hotbox. Chido.
Thank you very much to Plumas and Raul, friends that I met in Mexico City, and for giving that shout out to us here at the Strategic Hotbox. And thank you again to Stacey for talking about such an important topic and letting me dig in a little further and giving all of you lots of action and takeaway. So now let's break it down. Let's get into our top 5 kick-ass. Number 1 is to be the catalyst. As Stacey said, walk into your organization tomorrow, look around, ask questions. And when you ask some questions and you find some things out that maybe you didn't know or didn't like or anything like that, let's do something about it. Let's be the catalyst for change. So often we'll hear things that we don't think are right, and then people hang out and sit around and let it occur for the next 10 years. And that's the problem. We need to be the catalyst, each and every one of us. Me, you listening, you watching, Stacey, we'll do it together. Number 2 is pledge to make a difference. So from here on out, they're saying stand up for what you believe in. Know what it is that you believe and stand up for that. And don't be afraid to stand up for that. That doesn't make you a feminist. That doesn't make you a person that stands on a soapbox. That doesn't make you a crazy, outlandish individual. It just makes you somebody that believes in love and somebody that believes in a value that you have. So pledge for that to make a difference. Number 3 is understand your local culture. There's so much, we talk so much about broadening internationally and broadening big, and so often we forget about the local, about our own grandpas and our own backyards, and what can we get to know about people in your organization, people that are in your lives every single day, and about their subcultures and microcultures and the things about them that make them unique and different. Number 4 is implement some sort of unconscious bias education. Take a look at what unconscious bias that you might have. Talk about unconscious bias. Make sure that people are at least aware that they're there, that it's real, that even if you believe in your heart and you don't intend to do any of this, that it still happens. And so you can hedge against it. So you can do something about it. Until you can make those unconscious a little bit more conscious, there's nothing you can do about it. So implement some sort of education. And finally, share wins and losses. Don't be afraid to talk about the weaknesses or the bad as much as you talk about and celebrate the wins, as Stacey offered. That's your top 5. Kick ass. Thank you again to Stacey Walker for being here. I'm so excited that you're here and we got to talk about such an important topic. Thank you to all of you for sending your thoughts to us at thestrategichotbox.com. As always, you can reach out to us at Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or reach out to us at podcast@strategichotbox.com. Until next time, get out there and kick some ass.